Come on. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Hello. Oh, good. Keep memes in general. So many memes. Oh well. It's Johnny. From the duck. Can't believe they turned him into a duck. He became a duck. Look at that. They couldn't put him in Fortnite, but they made him a duck. At least Billy the Puppet made him the Fortnite, right? And he's got something, right, guys? You got the Billy mask. That's so cool. We're gonna try to make the chat friendly. We're not putting any swearing. We'll start soon. We're gonna start with a clip of Rewritten. This is like a remake. This is not the story that's coming out in October 27. This is the 2025 remake. I think I know that song. I think I read that song once. I think I saw a meme with that song. I'm gonna share the clip. This clip is gonna be on the live stream first, and then I'm gonna put it publicly on YouTube. It's been pretty well. Had a good day so far. I found out that there's different colored grapes, so yeah. I'm gonna share the screen to the. Quack, 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 quack. Yeah. Where's the exclusive scene that I had? Let me see. Alrighty. Alright, we're back. I'm gonna try to find it. Take a while. I'm gonna try to find it. Let's see. It's gonna take a while though. Let's see if I can find it. The thing with this one is that it's exclusive. I didn't put it out there. Oh no. Bear with me. I'll find it. This page. Oh, here it is. Why can't ads not stop existing? Guys, commercials exist. Y'all know how ad block doesn't even exist on YouTube? You can't do that anymore. Alright, I got the clip ready. This is a part of the remake of the FNAF movie that I'm working on. Not the story, this is the 2025 remake.
Wow. What happened?
Joe. Do you want me to turn the light off?
And that was the clip. And that was a look at the clip. It was supposed to have, yeah, we can see. It will be brighter when it releases. Don't worry. I'll try to make it brighter when it releases, after it releases. Yeah, unfortunately. I have nothing, like, I can't really do anything about that. But it's not actually blocked, like, I could still release it, but it won't get money off that. But, like, yeah. Anyways, let's get to the FNAF Movie 2 news. So you might be wondering, yes, no more FNAF movie content. Unfortunately, no. So let's get to the. I'm about to show you my profile picture for the FNAF movie 2. Share the screen. Okay. Take a look. And that is the profile picture that will be changing when the rewritten version ends and the live stream ends. That will be the profile picture we'll be using by now on until the remake releases, and then we'll finish it off and we'll stick to the FNAF 2 content. We'll give out updates of the movie. We'll give out like promos, news, any info. We'll try our best to we'll have like FNAF movie 2 content. The FNAF movie will no longer be having any like edits, no content, nothing like that, unless it's like if we get deleted scenes or something like that. I don't know, but maybe, but like it will be in the community tabs though, just no editing and all that. We're gonna focus on FNAF 2 now, as we're gonna focus with other horror movies as well, like Thanksgiving 2, Scream 7, and all that. Oh yeah, and Saw 11. We have a lot of Saw content coming out. And now we get. Oh no, I need to stop sharing. Oh, good. And now we get to the potatoes. The FNAF movie novel. You might be wondering, what's different from this novel from the movie? Well, let me tell you something. Doug is weird. Like, I read this, and Doug is weird. Here's FNAF movie novel. We'll be reading this entire novel from beginning to end, right there. You see that? Beginning to end. I have seen Trap. You know what's weird? Smile 2. Yeah, that's not canon though. Y'all know that Scott was gonna change the book, but he never did. Like, is he ever gonna release the FNAF movie novel, but like fixing up the Doug problem? Probably not. You know what's weird? When I saw Smile 2, the main character felt like the character from Trap. Like, she was a pop star. It felt like I was watching Trap when I was watching Smile 2. Y'all know about Smile 2? Can you believe it? They made a sequel. It's hard to know which one was better though. There's so many good horror movies that came out this year, but so many bad ones as well. Which one's better? Smile 2. It's just that good. Oh, we'll get to that. We'll get to how Doug is weird in this. Well, she's 18 to 19, but we'll get to that book. Yeah, the first smile was good. The only thing that ruined it was, never mind. But let's get to the book. So this is the cover of the book right here. Look how cool that is. The first thing you see is this cupcake. Who knew this cupcake could do a lot of damage? Scott really made the cupcake and said, I want this to be the guy who gets the attention in the film. Here's the front, the official movie novel, Five Nights at Freddy's. Joker 2 was mid. Yeah, it was. Joker 2 was horrible. It's kind of surprising how Joker 1 and Joker 2 is bad. Sure. Hello, Connor. How's it going? Y'all heard that Joker 2 is failing at the box office and it's coming to digital quickly and it's only been like a month? Crazy. The official movie novel, Five Nights at Freddy's, adapted by Andrea Raganer, based on the video game series. Oh my god, that's crazy. Five Nights at Freddy's, Scott Cawthon. Would y'all believe me that the Matt Pat video, the first one, is like 10 years old? Yeah. All right, let's get to the official movie novel. We're at the we're at the prologue. The screw sharp metal threads bit at Bob's fingertips, scoring deeply into the pads. Blood smeared the screw heads and dripped onto the rusty gray metal vents covered Bob was laboring to remove from the walls. Bob has already freed two of the vent screws. He tried to bend the cover back away from the wall, but the metal was too strong. He had to get a third screw out so he can swing the cover out of the way. The vent was large, big enough Bob thought. For him to get through, it had to be. If it wasn't, well, he couldn't think about that. Come on, he muttered. The words came out of his terrible gasp because Bob's heart was pounding so violently. It felt like it was beating the air out of his lungs. A heavy bang sound behind Bob, a loud bang that vibrates the table. Bob was crouched under, involuntarily. Bob raises his head, whacking it on the table. As he turns to look over his shoulder, the throbbing that erupts in his skull adds some hype to his rapid fire breathing. Bob stares at the barrier he built up in the front of the office. Metal door. Was it going to hold? Another bang. That one reverberates through the office. Bob felt the vibration course through all the bones of his body. The vibration turns into a panic convulsions as one of the filling cabinets he piled on top of the desk tears. The desk was wedged against the door, but if the cabinets fell, would the desk stay in place? The wobbling filling cabinets bump into the desk chair that topped the pile of the office furniture Bob has built into a blockage. The chair toppled over and crashed into the office living floor. The desk twitched, but stayed in place, ignoring the prickles between his shoulder blades as he rotated away from the door. Bob returned his concentration to the screw. The blooded, slicked screw stubbornly refused to turn for a couple more seconds. Bob gritted his teeth and put all his focus on the screw head. And finally, the screw came loose. He dropped it as the vent cover swiveled on its remaining screw and swung away from the opening in the walls. Bob peered into the black shaft extended in front of him. Stuffy air wafted from the opening, dust below upwards. He suffered and pressed a sneeze. Behind Bob, a fingernails on a blackboard screeched. Proceeded a deafening clank. Bob's head swiveled. The filing cabinet was no longer on top of the desk. It laid on the floor, and behind it, the desk began to move away from the doorknob. Bob sucked in his breath and looked around wildly for his flashlight. He set down the club-style light when he began working on the screws. Where was it? He said. Bob spotted the flashlight a few feet to his right. He lunged for it as another defending metallic thud came from the office door. The overhead speakers hiss. They emit as a tiny shriek. Time to go, Bob thought. Flipping on his flashlight, Bob crawled into the narrow darkness. Hold on, guys, my phone, my computer's dying. Up here. Let me just charge the computer. Hold on. We're gonna take a break. We're gonna charge the computer. Oh no. Yeah, grab the charger. Okay, and then we're gonna. Be right back. I'm gonna get water. Hello. Okay. Um, we're back. The computer was dying, just like poor Bob over here. Bob gritted his teeth and put all his focus on the screw head, and finally the screw came loose. It dropped as the vent cover swiveled on its remaining screw and swung away from the opening in the wall. Bob peered into the black shaft extending in front of him. Stuffy air wafted up from the opening. Dust below upwards. He pressed to sneeze. Behind Bob, a fingernails on a blackboard screech, preceding a defending clank. Bob's head swiveled. The filing cabinet was no longer on top of the desk. It laid on the floor, and behind it, the desk began to move away from the doorknob. Bob sucked in his breath and looked around wildly for his flashlight. He set down the club-style light when he began working on the screws. Where was it? Bob spotted the flashlight a few feet to his right. He lunged for it as another defending metallic thud came from the office door. The overhead speakers hissed, and they began to shriek. Time to go, Bob thought. Flipping on his flashlight, Bob crawled into the narrow darkness. More thuds and thumps chased them away from the office. He scrabbled as fast as he could. In his 30s, Bob has come to terms with his nerdish looks and receding hairline, but he's never been thrilled with his slight body. For once, though, he was grateful for his narrow shoulders, and even so, he still had to squirm and wiggle his way through the tight enclosure of the vent shaft. In spite of the close quarters, he made quick progress. The continuing counterwell coming from the speakers and the echoing bang and thumbs that sound like that they were pursuing Bob through the inkiness impels him, though the shaft had lightning speed. In what felt like both seconds and centuries, Bob reached the end of the vent shaft that led away from the office. The passage split as Bob aims the flashlight left, then right. The light reveals the same thing in both directions. Darkness and more darkness. Sweat stings Bob's eyes and drips off his nose. The stench of his perspiration was fetid in his comfort space. Bob sets down his flashlight so he can wipe his face. Another scourging howl came from the building speakers. Bob snatched up his flashlight. Without thinking any more, he heads down the left passageway, losing himself again in frantic crawling that defied his ability to quantify sounds or minutes. Bob clambers forward until he found himself looking at the vent cover, like the one that he removed in the office. Bob groans. Was he trapped? Is this the vent cover that was screwed on as securely as the one in the office? The cacophony comes from the speakers, Chris Loudy. The vent shaft shook as the entire building became quaking. Clinging to a tenuous thread of awareness, Bob's brain attempts to perceive all the stuff that was happening around his senses. His eyes registered the lights at once, gradually bright, and then everything became terrifying and dark. His feet realized the burning pressure, like clamping across the arcs. His spine communicates jarring and bumping, cracking into seemingly endless rocks, hard expanse. His forehead felt warm with thick moisture. It ran into his ears. Bob blinked as his brain worked to make sense of all these bodily reports. He attempted to move. As soon as Bob tried to get his body to follow his command, his brain reached a conclusion about his situation. Bob lifted his head and looked down the length of his prone body. He was being dragged down the hallway by his feet. Looking into the on and off shadow, Bob couldn't see what had hold of him, but he didn't need to see it. He knew what it was. Corkscrewing his spine in an attempt to get away, Bob's head slams against the floor beneath him. He felt his hip knock against something sharp and realized he was being dragged around the corner. Stiffing, his stomach flip-flopped with the realization of where he was. The gray scale of the instrument lights was abrupt, replaced by a swirling kaleidoscope of color. Red and yellow, purple and blue, floodlights streamed and radiance across Bob's field of vision. As his fingers flexed in his attempts to grab at something, anything, to stop his progress towards whatever he was being dragged, Bob recognizes the long-forgotten fun. His hands graze over a party hat. His thighs rub against a table leg. Bob was tugged hard, and his body was twisted. As it did, Bob gazed down on a wall covered with children drawings. The yellow flowers curled in paper covered in crayons, stick figures as well, in the air, current, as Bob was heading past the wall. Bob has looked at that wall long enough and hard just for a few hours earlier, well before he realized the danger he was in. The wall has given him creeps, seriously creeps. One drawing in particular, one that he noticed that was larger than the others, has captured his attention. This drawing hung as if it was like a masterpiece, a central masterpiece of an exhibit. The kept shows a large yellow rabbit standing hand to hand with five happy children. In spite of vaguely suggested by the cheerful scene, the image has troubled Bob. As Bob caught a glimpse of the rabbit drawing now, he felt bile rise in the back of his throat. He tried to scissor his legs to free himself from his captor. The motion did nothing but amp up the pressure around his feet. Bob was yanked hard. His head smacked against the wall as he went around yet another corner. For a few seconds, he thought he heard the distant sound of laughing children. Then the hints of consent that had surfaced to make him aware of his surroundings once again sank beneath a low layer of cobweb dullness. Bob cowered that he felt he was welcome the muffled understanding, unwilling to face the truth of what has happened and what is about to happen. He slipped into a dreamlike state that erased the hard edge of his predicament. He let himself float in and out of reality until suddenly his body was whipped from the floor and thrown. And Bob's back smacks into a cold metal. His mind was jarred into full alertness. His gaze immediately scans his surroundings. As he looks and takes a look at the pinching, he presses the steel wrappings itself around his back and his buttocks and thighs. Bob cries out and attempts to leave the chair and leap. He knew he was in before his muscles could lift him up, A green luminous shone from a button on the side of the chair, and metal restraints snapped into place around his wrist. A thick leather strap snugged tightly around his chest. Bob Wright, but he knew he was wasting his energy. The parts and service room, Bob thought. Of all the airy rooms in the pizzeria that he's been hired to guard, this was the room that has freaked him out the most when he's first seen it. Its walls were lined with metal shelving that sure rounded multiple stainless steel, workable, and industrial looking metal recliners that in no way conjured feelings of relaxation. The parts and service room was stuffed with full tools, wires, fastening, and various dismembered, disembodied robotic endoskeletons, metal feet, arms, hands, and other tangled stuff. When Bob had first seen the room, he felt like he was standing in a torture chamber. He had quickly backed out and slammed the door before, but once again, Bob trashed in the chair, using all the strength he could muster. He tried to free himself. The chair held onto him, and then it snapped backwards, stretching him flat. As soon as Bob was supine, a massive furry brown bear mask loomed over his face as Bob begins to scream. As Bob's pointless bawling filled the room, the bear mask opens up. The two half of the bear mask peels back like the wing of a beetle, expanding outwards as the fur parted, spinning robotic mechanisms filled Bob's vision. Razor sharp and in constant motion, the inside of the bear mask was blur of clicking and clanking knife-like proportions, and every edge of the exposed metal was like a small lethal weapon that would easily pierce the human skin. Bob begins fighting like an animal caught in a metal tooth trap. He whips his head from side to side. He buckles his torso. He kicks his legs. At first, Bob felt like his efforts were futile, but then he felt one of his armrests begin to wiggle. Straining to crank his neck, Bob looks at his wrist. He couldn't see what was loosening, but something was. Maybe a bolt was coming free. The despair that has been clenching at Bob since he hit the metal chair relaxed its grip just a little. Bob let himself start to think he might be able to escape. The mask, first cutting assault, slashed into Bob's jaw, overcoming by the stabs and slices that ripped at his forehead and cheeks and jaw into his eyes and mouth. Bob realized escape was impossible, and so was survival. Where they spend their compressed rest time, they either hold up in the gardening break room, which stinks of pink bleaches, not a good combination, or oh, I guess I don't know. Right. Oh my god. Alrighty. Chapter 1. Mike squints in annoyance as the sun and instance rays spear through the glass, as the bayou ceiling and the moth food court and jabs him in the eye. Scooting his yellow plastic chair a couple inches to the left, Mike ducks when a foam dart shot towards his head hits him. He managed to avoid the spongy projectile as he wishes he was anywhere but where he was. Rubbing his face, Mike blinks dry his scratchy eyes. His head felt so heavy that he wasn't sure his neck and shoulders had the strength to hold it up. Man, he was tired. He was very tired. What I need is a vacation, Mike thought, as he only built a little tent on the table in front of him, using his napkins and a paper cup. The motion of an actual vacation, an audible snort from Mike as he brought down a fist on his napkin cup construction, as if vacations were for people with lives, people with money. Mike has neither. If not a vacation, Mike would have settled for a little peace and quiet, but he wasn't going to get that either. Certainly not here. Most security guards are only given 20 minutes for their lunch break, so Mike and his co-workers had only two choices for where they spend their composed rest time. They could either hold up in the guards' dingy break room or stink of peat and bleaches, not a good combination, or they could come to the food court. Usually the food court was preferable, but today Mike wasn't so sure if it was the best choice. A kid was having a birthday party and screaming munchkins were running amok. Some moron has given the birthday boy dart guns as a gift, and the food court has turned it into a chaotic battle zone of assaults. In and around the pint-sized revealer, mall shopping flowed through a variety of fast food. The aroma that surrounds Mike were another battle, an international one. Italian sauces war with Mexican sauces, which spare with the smell of fried egg rolls and sizzling burgers. Mike's nostrils were inundated with a juggling mix of curry and ginger and oregano and cayenne and dill. Mike balls up the paper wrapper from the refried bean burrito. He's just eating without tasting. Now that's it was in his stomach. He immediately realized that the hot sauce on the burrito has been a little too hot. An inferno begins to burn his solar plexus. Mike shot the ball burrito wrapper into a nearby trash can. Thousands of the large steel mesh recipients were interspersed around the row of small square tables dotting the expanse of the mall food court dining area. Mike's paper ball hits the back rim of the can and then drops in with the rest of the food wrapper, napkins, and paper cups. Score! Mike thought instantly. Too bad he wasn't tall. For a few seconds, Mike blocked out the screaming children and imagined being someone much different than he was. At 25 years old, Mike was okay with his age. He was cool with his looks. He was 5'6" and pretty good in shape, even though he didn't have time to work out too much. He didn't think his dark brown hair, hazel eyes, and regular features were particularly handsome, but they weren't ugly either. On one of the rare dates that he's been in high school, a girl told him that his eyes were intense because of his pronounced blow ridge. She also said he had a chiseled jaw. He thought she read too many romance novels. For sure, she expected a lot more chivalry from him than he'd been capable of. She hadn't wanted a second date now. He couldn't even remember the girl's name. No, it wasn't Mike's appearance. No, that wasn't the problem. It was his circumstances. Or maybe it was him. Most of the time, Mike told himself that his life sucked because of the tragedy that has robbed him of a normal childhood and was robbing him of an adulthood. But the truth was that tragedy wasn't the real problem. The problem has come before the tragedy. Mike was the problem. If only he's been someone different back then. What would life be if Mike has been that kind of guy that the girl wanted to date in high school? What would he be doing right now if he's going to go to college? He wasn't tall. He wasn't quick. Maybe he could have played basketball or baseball, or maybe he could have taken a wood shop and stayed after school to work on projects. He's always like building stuff. He could have done a lot of things if he hadn't had to stay home and listen to this. Mike blinks and looks around the table. He frowns. Oh no. He's forgotten Jeremiah was there the entire time and that he took some doing off. Jeremiah wasn't a fade into the background kind of guy. He was an African American line backing size man with a health that testified to his love of burgers and copious consumption of soda. Where Mike's, unlike Mike Stark, blue mog guard shirt and matching pants loosely on his lanky body. Jeremiah's huge shoulders and large belly stretched the seams of his uniform. Jeremiah was an okay guy. He didn't get on Mike's nerves the way most of the other guards did. Jeremiah took a loud slurp of the cola from massive paper cups sitting on the blue plastic table in front of him. He waves the paperback book that he held. Jeremiah clears his throat and reads it out loud. And though the dreamer remains asleep, he walks through memory as if experiencing for the first time anew, no longer a passenger, but an active participant. Jeremiah frowns. Why is active participant in all caps? Is this like a title or something? Like achieving the level of Grand Lord in the video game? Mike figures Jeremiah's question was rhetorical, so he doesn't answer it. Jeremiah closes the book and looks at the light blue cover. Over the abstract image of the closed eye in the book's title, Dream Theory stretches diagonally in a wavering font as if the words themselves were falling asleep. Jeremiah waves the book again. Is this stuff for real? he asks, raising an eyebrow at Mike. Mike shrugs. Some people think so, I guess. Depends on what you believe. Jeremiah nods. He drops his lid to half mask over his round brown eyes as he gazes past Mike's shoulder. Mike could tell Jeremiah wasn't watching the dart gunfight. Jeremiah was lost in his thoughts. After a few seconds, Jeremiah sighs. Summer '82, I traded the mint condition car rookie junior rookie car for a used copy of Missile Command. That card's probably worth like $800 now. I like to participate in that memory and activity. Kick myself in the ass for such a stupid decision. He let out a bark of laughter. Then he settles down and taps the book. Can I keep it? Mike reaches out and snatches the book from Jeremiah. No. Jeremiah's lips droop. For a second, he looks like a downtrodden, oversized puppy. Sorry, Mike says. I'm not done with it. Jeremiah, usually happy-go-lucky smile returns. No problem. Feeling bad for snapping at Jeremiah, Mike says, I think we have time for a shake. Want one? My treat. Jeremiah lets up. Really? Thanks, dude. Yeah. Sure. Mike stood and makes his way over to the crown and bright red laminate corner of the food court dairy freeze. A woman who was wearing too much perfume at the counter, and as soon as Mike heard what she was saying, he started to regret his offer to buy Jeremiah a shake. I want a 3 scoop sundae, the woman said in a strange accent that was half southern drawn and half uttered crushed British. But instead, 3 full scoops of 3 flavors. I want half scoop of 6 flavors. I want rum, raisin, banana, nut, pecan, fudge, strawberry cheesecake, lemon sherbet, and licorice. On top of the one raisins, I want strawberry syrup on the peanut butter, chocolate, and I want marshmallow toppings on the. Mike shifts his feet. He took a long deep breath and turns away, attempting to shut out the sound of the woman's international odor. She moves on from the toppings and was describing how she wanted the ice cream arranged in the bowl. Although the birthday party has ended, kids were still playing among tables in the food court. Some of the kids were a group of 5. They were pretending to be cops and robbers at the edge of the tables near the food court center of the feature. A decorated fountain shaped like a big drink cup with straws sticking up from the middle. Water spoos from the straw and was caught in the multicolor lights that sprayed out of the rim of the cup. The fountain was a little cheesy, but Mike kinda liked it. Hands up, one of the little kids near the fountain shouted. The sound came from a purple-haired girl. She had her hair hands twisted around a pretend gun. A black-haired boy was caught in her sights. He threw his arms up. Book him, the girl ordered another boy in freckles with spiky hair. He marched over to the black haired boy and pretended to put handcuffs on him. Mike smiles. The things kids got from TV. The freckled kid starts leading the handcuffed kid away, talking him to. Mike's smile abruptly disappears. Just behind and beyond the pretend cop and the pretend criminal, a small boy, maybe 6 years old, was pressing up against the half wall at the edge of the food court. The top of the half wall was filled with plants, some of which were drooped over the wall. The boy and his blond, curly hair, a tangle that flopped into his eyes, huddled under the front of some kind of fern. His brown birches, his mouth compressed, his gaze darting left and right, his frail arms wrapping tightly around a plush penguin. The boy was a picture of fear. Mike frowns. Why did the boy look so scared? Was he in trouble? Chocolate, peanut butter, and buttermint twist? A lively female voice asks. Mike registers the voice, but kept his attention on the little boy until something gently pokes him in the finger. Mike turns towards the poke. A smiling gray-haired woman pointed at the dairy freeze counter. I believe you're next, she says. Her voice was warm and kind, and it briefly brought back a memory of, you want your user, right? This time, Mike turned toward the voice. Hey, Sydney, he said. Sorry. Sydney flashes her wide smile at Mike, a pretty college student who worked at the dairy freeze to pay for classes, majoring in economics. So she told Mike, even though he expressed no interest in her personal life. Sydney was friendly with everyone. According to Jeremiah, however, Sydney paid particularly attention to Mike. Mike hasn't noticed though. Mike frowns. His thoughts was on the scared little boy. Was the kid lost? Why is he alone? Your usual? Sydney repeats. Huh? Mike focuses on Sydney. Her long brown hairs was in braids today. Uh, Sydney hovers her ice cream scoop over a tub of chocolate peanut butter twist. Yeah, sure, Mike says. He might as well get himself something now that he was here. And a chocolate shake for Jeremiah. Got it? Mike turns away from Sydney and looks past the little girl, whose dance has degenerated into giggle fest. He took a step to his right so he can see the area by the half-wall planter. He spotted the fern, but the boy was gone. Mike quickly scans the area, aware that his breath was quickening. Mike could feel a rushing sound in his ear. He recognized that sound. It was a sound of panic. So when are you gonna bring Abby by? Sydney asked. Mike heard Sydney, but he didn't acknowledge her. He was still desperately trying to spite the little boy. We got a new flavor, Sydney continues. A rainbow explosion. I bet she'll go bonkers for it. Mike steps away from the dairy free counter, dodging a couple of roughhousing preteen boys. Mike strolls past a row of tables. Mike? Sydney calls out Chase as he broke into a half trot, heading toward where he last seen the boy. Mike's gaze was a laser probe of fixation. It ignored everything except for one thing. There, Mike spotted the boy. He was about 40 feet away, no longer by the half-wall planter. The boy was heading toward the fountain. The boy had his back turned to Mike, but now Mike recognized the floppy blonde curls, and he saw the penguin flipping and sticking out from under the boy's elbow. The boy was stumbling awkward through the food court, heading toward the mall main course, and he was no longer alone. As Mike jogged closer to the boy, he saw that a tall, dirty, blond man has his hand clamped around the boy's wrist. The man was pulling the boy along, wrenching him into a pace that was obviously far too fast for such a little kid. Hey! Mike yelled. Mike breaks into a run, shoving through a young couple holding hands. Mike kicks the chairs aside and pushes past anyone who got in his way, only aware of his head turning toward him and a few annoying grunts and angry protests. Mike sprints to the food court. Because the man was hindering by the awkwardly floundering little boy, Mike quickly closes the clamp and between him and the man. Hey you! Mike shouted. Stop! Like most of the people around Mike, the man started to turn toward Mike. Mike briefly registered the man's raised eyebrows before launching himself through the last 3 feet of the space between him and the jerk who was trying to take the kid. As Mike shot toward the man, Mike pulled back his arm, clenching his fist and aiming a swift jab at the man's nose. Mike heard a crackling pop as he felt the cartridge give away beneath his knuckles. At the same time, Mike's momentum resulted in a tumbling collision with the man. Together they spilled into the base of the water fountain. When Mike hit the water, he lost his ability to logically process what he was doing. Something primitive in him took over, something that turned his arms into churning pistons that kept driving towards the man's face. When the man fought back, landing a glancing blow against Mike's jaw and angling a knee into Mike's belly, Mike's rage revved into overdrive. He threw himself onto the man, flinging both of them down into the water. Whenever a result of the man's irritation or Mike's out of control fury, Mike bit his lip. He tasted blood. Mike felt blood on his knuckles too. The warmth of the contrast to the fountain's ice cold water. Out of the corner of his eye, Mike saw red filaments swirling in the clear fountain water. The red triggered a memory, and the memory turned Mike's thoughts dark, so dark that it felt like he was falling into the black void. Chapter 2. Shrills beeping paced through drifting filmy clouds. Mike opens his eyes and groans. For a couple seconds, he managed to cling the sensations of beaticy left over from his sleep. But the beeping continues, piercing and insistent. Mike flings out his left hand and slaps it toward of what he thought was another cheap plastic digital alarm clock that was sat next to him to the battered metal desk lamp on his rickety nightstand. Instead of hitting the alarm, Mike's hand lands on the cassette player near the lamp. He felt his fingers brush against a paperback book, and then he heard the book swift off the nightlight and hit the thin carpet on his hardwood floor with a soft thud. Mike pulls his hand back, his fingers in full on early morning klutz mode. Once again, bump something. This time it was the plastic bottle of Mike's pills. Mike heard the bottle tippity tap down the side of the nightstand and lands on the carpet with a shing sound. He cringed, hoping he remembered to put the cap on tight. Mike started to sit up, but the motion sent what felt like a jagged of shard of glass through his temporal lobe. Mike clutches at his head. The glass shard starts moving around his skull. The alarm continues screeching and beeping, seems to drag the shard even deeper into his brain. Mike squints towards his nightstand and once again attempts to turn off the alarm. This time his palms hit its target. The infernal noise stops. Mike groans again and rubs his temple. Sighing, he swings his legs out of the bed and reaches for the glass next to the cassette player. At least he managed to knock that over. The glass was still half full of water. Mike guzzles and sets the glass back down. Mike's bare feet shift, and his right one encounters his prescription pills bottle, wincing as he bends over because the motion intensifies his headache. Mike picks up the dark amber plastic container. Thankfully, he has put the cap on the bottle. The little white prescription pills, a couple thousand of them, were still safely inside. Mike stuffed the pill bottle under his mattress, just a few inches from the edge. Then he leaned over and over, gritting his teeth against the increased jabbing in his head. He picks up his Dream Theory paycheck paperback, setting the book next to the cassette player. Mike hits the rewind button on the machine. Once the cassette tape starts its whispering whip of motion, Mike managed to calmly inhale. Finally, his morning routine was starting to fall into place. Usually, Mike's first motion after waking up were about hit the alarm, hide the pills, rewind the tape. In the morning, the usual high pain level of his headache has turned Mike's routine into a one-stooge show. The tape of smooth rewind settled him back into a sense of normality. Okay, Mike said. He strokes his hand toward his hair, standing. Mike took his couple steps away from his bed, and he planted his feet at the edge of his bare, pale blue and gray rag rug. He stretched his arms overhead and willed himself to ignore his headaches. Mike drops to the floor and begins to do push-ups. Not counting, Mike lowers himself and lifts himself over and over again. Beneath Mike's palm, the carpet felt scratchy and dirty. Vaguely, he tried to remember when was the last time he vacuumed his room. Lifting his head as he pumps his body up and down, Mike took it in the familiar spirally of his space. The nearly empty room held only his narrow bed, and the small nightstand was nothing but a bare cell, a cell that kept Mike separated from the world. Even his one window, which might have reminded him of that reality that existed beyond his own suffering, was covered by a heavy blackout curtains. Dropping his head again, Mike continues to pound out his push-ups. The routine, though painful, comforted him, as did his prison-like surroundings. A few more minutes of this punishment and he might be able to face his day. Abby looks into her drawing pads and concentrates on getting the image just right. Tugging her tongue behind her teeth, she drags her pencil across the page in a long, curvy line. Pointing back, she frowns. Did the image look right? Not sure. Abby lifts her gaze as she looks over to the opening in the hiding tent that surrounds her. Construction from the blanket held into the place by her white painted nightstand, her matching small desk, and one edge of her sword. Wearing also white but not matching, Abby's tent snugged up to her bed, I bet she didn't like nearly as much as she liked the cozy confine of the Heidi tent. The two stuffed fluffy pillows on the floor to another blanket scrunched up around the pillows. The inside of Abby's tent was like a little nest that they made. Abby felt like a safe and cared for baby bird. The pillows and the blanket smelled like a generated that ever watched them. Abby had seen the degenerate box. It was labeled rain scents. Abby didn't think that degenerate smelled like rain, but it didn't smell bad. It was kind of sweet and fruity. That meant that the inside of Abby's tent was sweet and fruity, too. Abby liked it in her Heidi tent. She could handle it almost everything when she was tucked inside of the tent. Take, for instance, the grunting coming from her brother's room. Mike was doing push ups again, and Abby wished she didn't have to listen to him. He clearly didn't like doing them. Abby could tell that from all the moans and groans. When Mike did the push ups, Abby felt bad, as if something terrible was poking at her belly. She didn't like feeling all that. Although inside Abby's Heidi tent it was cool and dim, and a fat ray of sun was sweeping past the tent opening, the sun ray landed on the walls opposite the tent. Many of Abby's complete drawings covered that wall. Abby used the drawings as nudges to help her draw better. Although most of the things in the drawings were stick figures, some of them were more real looking. Abby was getting better at drawing. That made her feel good. Not all of Abby's feel good forever and ever. Abby had felt like she didn't really know how to be. No one seemed to want her around much. Not her brother, not her babysitter Max, not the kids at school, or the ones at the development center. Well, no one was quite right either. Dr. Lillian seems to like having Abby around. Dr. Lillian was the one who got Abby all the cool colored drawing pencils she uses now. Dr. Lillian says Abby was talented beyond 10 years old. That meant Abby draws better than the other kids her age. Drawing made Abby feel special. So did the things she drew. Drawing was Abby's way into the world she liked being in. It was a world where she was wanted. A sharp knock sounds on Abby's flimsy wood door. Abby puts aside her drawing pads and pulls close the two sections of the blanket that forms the opening of her tent. She picks up the doll, her plush dolphin, through the narrow cracks beneath the blanket, and she looks toward the square pale brown surface of her door. She wishes her door was a big thickened head latch on it, kind of like a castle door. Abby, Mike calls out from the other side of Abby's not castle door. Abby didn't answer her brother. Are you ready, Abs? My name's not Abs, Abby whispers. My name's Abby, and I'm not here. Abby not not lock with the door. Mike stucks his head into Abby's location. He looks toward Abby's bed and shifts his gaze to the cracks of the blanket and peers through. Abby clearly heard her brother's loud sigh. Abby stares at Mike's feet as they head toward her Heidi tent. Her brother wore a pair of black dress socks. They were faded and stretched out, so they kind of were like crumpled around his ankles. And both socks were full of holes. He left big toes stick out through the largest of his ragged opening. The socks covered feet stopped really close to the front of Abby's Heidi tent. The feet, or maybe it was Mike himself, smelled sweaty. Abby wrinkled her nose, then put her face into the dolphin soft floor. Dolphin wasn't clean either, as the blankets in Abby's Heidi tent didn't smell sweet and fruity. But he didn't smell bad. He smelled kind of like Abby. And Abby smelled like lemons because of her shampoo smelled like lemons. Abby, Mike said, I know you're awake. Abby squeezes her eyes shut. She heard whispery movements, and she felt like the blankets flap of her Heidi tent separated. Mike lets out another long sigh. Abby. As Abby keeps her eyes closed, Dolph pressed against her face. She didn't move. A scrape and a fluttering sound. Abby felt the air whisk over her bare arms. She opens her eyes, and Mike was shaking one of the chairs that held part of their Heidi tent in place. Okay, okay, jeez, Abby yells. Mike heads poked through the Heidi tent flaps. His hair stuck all up weird. She thought it looked stupid that way, but he might have done it on purpose. Some of the boys at school had their hair like that. Ivy thought about her own hair. She probably looked stupid at the moment too. Her hair went all over the place when she slept. Oh, not so fine like her butter, so it's tangled up easily. Abby glares at Mike. You're being a jerk, Abby says. Mike rolls his eyes. When Mike rolls his eyes, Abby sometimes felt like she was looking at her own eyes in someone else's head. Abby and Mike's eyes were a lot alike. Even though his were a lighter brown than hers, they call his hazel, their eyes sloped down at the outside edge like they were a little sad all the time. That makes sense, actually. Besides their eyes and the black, slightly wavy hair they both had, Abby didn't think she and Mike looked much alike. Mike's face was kind of hard, like his skin were stretched over metal or wood. Abby's face was softer and rounder. Mike jostled the hiding tent again. Come on, Abby, I have to be somewhere, you know that. Abby mimics my sigh. It's not my fault you lost your job at the mall. Abby sighs a second time. She knew that getting ice cream from the dairy freeze was not something that was going to happen anymore. If ever, Mike had gotten a discount from the food court when he worked there. No more discount, no more ice cream. Welcome back. You're right about that, Mike says. Abby knew he was talking about the job, not the ice cream she was thinking of. But if I'm late, it'll be your fault. Mike likely kicks the side of the blanket tent. 5 minutes, want to dress, okay? Abby sticks her tongue out at Mike. He copies her. She thought the tongue might have looked a little alike, but his tongue was bigger. Mike turns to leave the room. Abby looks at the dolphin and raises an eyebrow at him. The dolphin seems to go along with her idea, so she throws him through the opening of the hidey tent. Dolphin arcs through the air and plows his blunt nose into the middle of Mike's back. As Dolphin drops to the yellow and green braid rug that covers my Abby's wooden floor, Mike turns around. Abby looks at Mike's feet. Nice socks, she says. You wouldn't talk, Mike says. He turns and left the room. Abby crawls onto the tent and scoots forward to the rescue. Doff. She scrambles upright and looks down at her own feet. She wore one red and white striped sock and one yellow polka dot sock. Abby shrugs and hugs her dolphin close. He didn't seem to care about her mismatched socks. Mike glanced up at the gray clouds that hung so low. It felt like they were pressing him down into the cracked concrete walkway that led up to the sad rectangular brick building. He didn't want to go in, but the building, whose simple downtrodden architects shouted underfunded government office, looking like it could barely hold its own overbearing status crowns. Mike hatreds started the clouds. They were always iron like and depressing, and they were all spineless, all show and no substance. Starry clouds make the sky dark and threatening, but they actually held a little bit of prescription. Mike had learned that in science class, and for some reason, he remembered it. Maybe because he felt like a stratus cloud himself. Mike hesitated at the base of the shallow steps leading into the basement in front of him. How many times have I been miserable in this place? He lost count. Mike kicks a loose piece of crumbling concrete from his steps. He found the crunching sound satisfying, scratching his shoulders. Mike slouches up the steps and went into the building. The interior of the building that houses the city's social service office was even uglier than the interior. With the dirty cream wall and an trestle-grade faded brown carpet, the lobby and main hall were much more attractive than the sewer. Not that Mike has ever been in the sewer, this place was close enough. Shuffling forward, Mike plucks a number from a scarred black number dispenser near the counter at the far side of the lobby. He looks at the little piece of paper that at the far side of the corner. Number 27. He looks up at the dimly lit number displayed on the wall. The number 11 flickered under the fluorescent lights that cast a harsh glare over everything. Great, Mike mutters. Mike drags his feet across the noble carpet as he heads towards the line of moldy plastic chairs along the left wall of the lobby. The other 26 people who held paper numbers, along with their spouses of children or friends. Mike had none of the above. Crowded the brutality of the small area, however. An end chair was open. Mike heads towards it and takes a seat. As soon as he sat, he used to use he uses the butt to scooch the chair away from his neighbor. The middle-aged woman who sat in the adjoining chair was large, and her sweatpants and hand sanitizer eroded into Mike's space. Mike felt the woman's gaze on him as he repositions the chair. He heard her huff, but he didn't glance up, looking into the eyes of the other people waiting to see a social worker was never a good idea. You can get swallowed by a myriad of life-sucking depression if you made eye contact with the other people in this building. Everyone here was a crummy situation or another. Dealing with his own baggage was hard enough. Mike didn't need to get a glimpse of everyone else. Even though Mike didn't see the others in the room, he sensed their presence and felt like a bar in the sorrows. Mike could smell and hear the people around him too. The waiting area was filled with sounds and nervously shoving feet, sniffs, and coughs, and clearly of people weak sobs and mumbling as well. Even though Mike didn't want to hear other people's problems, some of the snippets of conversation got past his attention to mind his own business. So I say to him, one whipping female voice related, I say you can't just do that to another person. Where are we supposed to go when you throw us out? A deep male voice on the other side of the room booms loudly enough to be heard outside the building. Man, I can't put Man can't put food on the table with like the peanuts they try to pay. Mike mentally plugs his ear and stares onto his feet, turning out his surroundings. Mike disappears into his favorite game. What would I be if I was doing? Mike likes to play all sorts of imaginary scenarios. When he indulges in this game, sometimes he was a reporter or a travel photographer. Sometimes he was a scientist or a doctor or a judge. Most often, Mike was a contractor, the head honcho in charge of the buildings, big houses, or interesting office buildings. Not buildings like this one. Never ever was Mike a security guard or a janitor or a mock clerk or an unemployed loser looking for whatever work he could find. Mike knew that playing this kind of make believe game was something he should have outgrown years ago, but let himself imagine a life different than the one he lives what now gets him up in the morning and puts one foot in the front of the other. When Mike drops into being pretend, Mike can stay the real Mike. He can work a clean state. He can stow all the baggage, all the disappointment, all the guilt, and he couldn't put that away from time to time. The weight of it probably would have driven him up to the wall by now, or killed him. Mike wasn't sure which would have been worse. Number 27. Mike looks up. Already? Jeez. A 40-something woman with a tight perm and eyes that look like they've seen more than hours of to sleep per night, for years even, looks around the room. Mike lifts a hand and got her attention. The woman tugs on the hem of her wrinkled orange blouse. The blouse clashes. Mike thought, with the woman rusted color skirt, the skirt hunts crooked on the woman's skinny hips. The skirt was like 2 inches around the woman's right knee, an inch below the left. Number 27, the woman calls out the mic. Mike nods. Follow me, the woman says. Chapter 3. The tall, slender man who leans back casually in a cracked black vial off his chair had the manners of someone presiding over an executive boardroom. In fact, the man presided over nothing but a cheap wood veneer top desk in a closet-sized windowless office, and an even cheaper acrylic nameplate at the front of the desk announced that the man's name was Steve Raglan. Under Steve Raglan, the nameplate revealed that the man was a career counselor, given Raglan's smug expression that clearly telegraphed his inflation self-opinion. Mike was sure that the guy thought he was the best career counselor on the planet, or maybe he was just the best person on planet, really. Mike really, really wanted to punch the guy. He seemed punchable. Vividly with grayish dark hair, Raglan studies Mike with narrow eyes and magnified and contouring by thick round black rimmed glasses. The eyewear dominates a dimmish face topped by high forehead. Raglan flashes Mike with a grin. The grin was toothy. Looks like a grimace and a smile. So, Mr. Smith, Raglan says, what's your deal, pal? Raglan gazes ran up and down the length of Mike as if Raglan was like, sizing up a cow before it trips up to the slaughterhouse. Raglan continues to recline in his chair. One of his large feet was propped against the ugly scarred desk. The foot waggles as if Raglan was keeping time with a tune that only he can hear. Well, Mike, Raglan asks. Old sport. Mind if I call you Mike, old sport? Mike shrugs. He didn't care what this guy called him. He didn't care what the guy had to say either. Anything Raglan said would be annoying. The man had a grating voice, utterly raspy and nasty and then smooth and sing-song. It was as if Raglan couldn't figure out who he was or what he wanted to sound like. But whatever, Mike didn't care about why Raglan sounded the way he did. All Mike wanted to do was get this meeting over with. So, where are you, Mike? Some kind of head case? Raglan uses his wagging foot to push off the desk. He straightens his chair and leans forward, propping his elbows and fills bladder, and inhales a single manual file folder and red coffee mug, which appears to be empty at the moment. The folder was the only one on Raglan's desk, other than an old landline phone and empty metal mesh inbox. The desk looks like it was never needed for any actual work. Dr. Jekyll and Mister I like to beat up dads, Raglan says. Is that who you are? Mike stares at Raglan. Not only was the man saying nothing he had expected to hear, there was something off about him. Mike's nose twitched. Maybe it was the guy's odor. Mike couldn't place it. It wasn't sweat or anything like that. It was the cologne or food. It was something musky. Something that made Mike think of the damp basement in his childhood home. He never liked going down into the basement. He didn't like Raglan either. Raglan didn't seem to care that Mike remained mute. You attacked a man in broad daylight. Oh, man, Raglan said. Mike's inner eyes replaced the fight in the food court fountain. He felt the cold water taste the coppery blood. Mike licks his lips and stays silent. The front of his own child. Raglan went on. Mike's memories take him back to the fountains again. He remembers the pressure of Jeremiah's arms around his shoulder. Mike! Jeremiah has shouted in Mike's ear. Come on, Mike! Mike has fought against Jeremiah as his gaze has searched for the little boy he just rescued. Then Mike has heard the boy scream, Daddy! Still holding his penguin. The boy has scrambled into the fountain to reach the man Mike was attacking. That's when Mike has finally let Jeremiah put him away. One has to wonder, Raglan said, tearing Mike from the shameful memory. What would possess a person to act the way you did? Mike looks down at his hands, which were twisted together against his churning stomach. Look, man, it was a misunderstanding, Mike says softly. I thought that. Yeah, Raglan interrupts as he opens the folder in front of him. There's there's a note here. He taps on the top page of the file. Given your unique history, I understand how you could have made that mistake, but that's not your whole story, is it? Raglan flips through the few pages of Mike's file. He pauses and clears his throat. Tapping the page, he reads, Towsers Associated, 2 months employment terminated, cause a separation. Media World custodial staff, 1 week fired because of a. Oh my god. Raglan leans over the page and reads even more info. Slowly and slowly. Then he gets to something that shocks him. But that's not the whole story, isn't it? He pauses for a moment. His eyes, his eyes remove his mind. Then he slowly, journally, unpleasantly, and reminds himself about something else. Ragnar looks up. Coffee? What? Mike asked. The non-skier caught him off guard. Would you like some coffee? Ragnar asked. Mike couldn't process the request. How had they gone from a walk down of the memory lane of his failures to a friendly offer of all coffee? All Mike could do was stare at Raglan. Raglan shrugged and pushed off of his chair. He grabbed the red mug and took 2 steps to the coffee maker that sat on top of the graphene cabinet in the corner of his office. Mike hasn't noticed the coffee maker or the aroma of the coffee either. He's been too distracted with the odor from Raglan. Mike shifts his chair and looks at Raglan's shoes. Has the man stepped in something that caused the stench? Mike couldn't tell. Raglan has scuffed brown loafers. They didn't appear to be stained. Raglan pours his coffee, and Mike finally caught the nutty stench of the brew. Raglan tears apart a packet of sugar and adds it to the mug. He didn't bother to stir it. Instead, he turns and looks at Mike. I'm gonna be honest with you, Mike. Ragnar says, give me your track record. Your options are going to be extremely limited. Mike makes a face. Time to grovel. I'll take anything, Mike says. Any job you have. Even so, Ragnar says. He lifts his mug and takes another sip of his coffee. He smiles and closes his eyes briefly, savoring the flavor. Yummers. Mike resists the urge to squirm with impatience. He watches Raglan back to his desk chair. Let's say I'll put you up for, I don't know, let's say a dishwashing job. Next thing you know, I'm getting a call telling you try to drown the fry cook in the sink with all the dirty dishes. Oh, thanks. We're barely not even done with the story. Raglan set down his mug and tapped it with his index finger. The dull clunking sound made Mike realize that it was only quiet in Raglan's office. Even though the adjacent office was occupied by the other social workers and the people who needed help, the nearby conversations sounded like little more than swifty swords of words, like the distant crash of ocean waves. Raglan leaps forward and nails on Mike with a look so severe that Mike was tempted to lean away. Raglan's superior, jovial air seems to morph into something else, something almost threatening. That will be very bad for me, Mike, Raglan says. Very bad. Not to mention the poor fried cook. Raglan leans back, and the corner of his mouth twitches slightly. He's screwing me, Mike thought. But what can Mike do about it? Nothing. All he can do is return to groveling. I'm not a fighting person, Mike says. And I'm sure you're not, Raglan says. The words were dripping in sarcasm. Raglan's mouth quirks. Mike clenches his fist. He was seconds away from proving his last statement was a lie. The man seriously needs to have the pompous expression beaten off his face. I can tell this is hard for you, Mike, Raglan says. Mike saw the twinkle in Raglan's eyes. The guy was seriously enjoying baiting Mike. I'm being here. You don't like it, do you? Mike didn't bother to respond. You strike me, Ragnar went on, as someone who rather you strike me as someone who rather I don't know, dig their own eyes out with a spoon, then ask for help. Mike stood up. You know what? Forget that. Forget this. I don't care. Mike starts to turn away from Raglan's desk. I think I have something for you, Raglan says. Mike rotates his head back towards the Raglan, but he's reminded and decides to remain standing. Come on, Raglan says. I like to make jokes. A little levity lightens the mood. Why don't you sit down? Come on. Mike crosses his arms and looks down at the idiot behind the tacky desk. You think you have something? Mike asks. Raglan tilts back in his chair. It's a security gig, he said. Full disclosure, it's not great. High turnaround, it's what we call in the business, call it. But you get to be your own boss, sort of, and you really only have to worry about one thing. Mike waited. He suspected Raglan was still toying with him. All you gotta do is keep the place tidy, Raglan finally said, and keep people out. That's two things, Mike said. A muscle twitches at the corner of Raglan's eye, the right side of his jaw bulges briefly. That's what it feels to be messed with, Mike thought. Deal with it. Are you interested? Raglan asked. Mike shifts his feet. He timidly allows himself to feel a little anticipation. How's the pay? Raglan snorts. What do you think? Not good. The hours are worse now. Mike anticipations to soften the disappointment. Bad hours. Mean night. I can't do nights. Raglan cooks his head up. I'm sorry? I can't do nights, Mike repeated. Raglan picks up his mug and takes a long, noisy slurp of the coffee. Mike inhales the smell of his coffee beans. Oh, God. But wrinkles his nose when he once again caught the stench of that ruffles from Raglan himself. Well, why can't you do nights? Raglan asked. Mike wasn't about to try to explain his situation to Raglan. It wasn't the man's business. It was personal. So Mike said nothing. Silence grew into such a commanding presence that it felt like a third person had stepped into the office. Raglan attempts to stare down Mike. Mike held the man's gaze, but didn't move a muscle. Raglan finally gave in. Shame. Pity even, he said. Raglan reaches out and pulls open the desk drawer in the front of his lean stomach. He rummages into the drawer. Mike hears a clatter, a rustle even, a metallic thunk. Finally, Raglan pulls out a business card. He heads his order and gives out Mike his card. In case you have a change of heart. Mike didn't want to take the card. All he wanted was to get out of there. But he wasn't in a position to burn bridges. He takes the card, then he stomps out of Raglan's office. After Mike has left Raglan's office, he's gone on his own job hunt. Who needs Raglan? Mike could find a job, his own job, or maybe not. By the time Mike gave out his and headed home, the pretty gray clouds were being consumed by a night that seemed to be in a hurry to take over. Even though the day was still held on to some light, the sun was nowhere to be seen. Just as well, Mike wasn't in the mood for sun. As Mike turned the corner onto the street, his old seeing backfired. The car lurched as Mike had to stomp on the gas to keep the car from stalling out. Mike, man, he hated his car. And my knowledge of old parts from the junkyard, Mike's car might not have been the ugliest vehicle in the world if he hadn't been so grateful to have something else. Anything with wheels and an engine. He had been embarrassed to be seen in a thing, but then again, Mike wasn't really that embarrassed easily. When you carry around the kind of regret that has been with you everywhere he went, the usual thing that embarrassed people didn't make a dent. Take the neighborhood Mike lived in, for example. The bedraggled streets looked more like a shack that was considered part of the town, originally built as a makeshift housing for the third poor that they brought into the work in town factories. The houses hadn't been much as they were been put up to be. Now that they were even less, all the houses on the street looked identical, given or taken the variety of faded colors and the various old cars, law equipment, toys, and other junk piled on them. Mike and Abby's house were yellow, or at least they used to be. It was more tan than yellow now because it was so dirty. The shallow foot roof originally black with fuzzy green moss. Like many of the houses on the street, Mike's place had no front lawn. All it was a collection of weeds and the ever-widening oil stain that Mike's car added to every day. Mike turned his so-called driveway into a dirt and gravel expanse that held a lot of oil stain. He turned off his car and the engine coughed several times before expiring for the night. As soon as the engine went silent, Mike pulled the keys from the ignition, but he didn't move. Sometimes Mike got stuck in the moment. He couldn't convince himself that moving on to the next thing was worth his trouble. It wasn't that Mike was suicidal or anything. He wasn't ready to meet his maker. He wasn't even remotely ready for the accounting. But Mike often wished life came with more. He wished for more timeouts or maybe freeze frames.
It would have been helpful to have a remote so he could stop time and catch his breath. Nearby, an engine read the sound kickstarts Mike again. He opens his car door, getting out, up to the front porch, if you can call it that. Only a 3 foot square rise of concrete under a mystical overhang led to the door with peeling dirty white paint. A red sheet of paper was taped to the door. Mike grabbles the rustling door knob with his right hand and he tore the paper off. He knew he didn't need to look at it, but he did anyways. It was like googling at the car wreck. Sometimes it was impossible to turn away from foulness. The paper said exactly what Mike expected to say. Notice of delinquency. Tell me something I don't know. Mike mutters as he stuffs the paper in his pocket as he wrinkles the black slats and opens the front of the door. It seems Maxine has heard Mike car pull up in the front of the house. How could she not? The beater needs a new muffler around among many other pages other things. When the engine thunderous splutter had gone silent, Maxine has waited to hear the car door slam. When it didn't, she knew that Mike's day hasn't gone well. If only Maxine could comfort him. Maxine snorts and turns up the sound on Mike's TV. The TV was an old analog set, one with truly crap reception. Continuous wiggles of static wound across the seat, no matter what channel you were on the screen. Maxine was currently watching QVC. She liked QVC. When Micah teased Maxine about her addiction to the shopping channel, she pretended that his words hasn't bothered her at all. Maxine was good at pretending. Nonchalance was her go-to defending mechanism. When you were bored with an expression, moved lengthily, and kept your words as apathic as possible, no one knew what you were actually thinking or feeling. It was made for good armor. Maxine could never be hurt because she pretended that she was hurt proof, or at least that's what she told herself. Maxine finally heard Mike's car door slam as her favorite host introduces the next product, a silver ring with emerald cut stone. The ring was a one line affordable jewelry designed by a woman on the screen, an ex actress who probably made more money selling rings and bracelets and necklaces than she ever earned from that B movie role. Both the hostess and the ex-actress had big hair and fake hands, but Maxine didn't mind that. The superficially fakery was part of QVC's appeal for Maxine. She enjoys watching others put on the same kind of don't look at me show like she did. Not every guy can afford a real diamond, the hostess says. So it's awesome that you created this line of stupid engagement rings, isn't it? The ex actress responds ever so humbly. This particular ring is one of my favorites. Even though Maxine watches the QVC obsessively, she didn't like all that much of what the channel hawked. The ring on the screen, for instance, was gaudy in the extreme. The price tag was laughable high. At only $79.99, the hostess said, this ring is a bargain. It's worse than the what of tinfoil. Maxine told the hostess on the screen. Mike came to the front door and Maxine quickly effected a bored I don't give a crap about anything position. Already reclined, she lets her lids fall half closed and she makes sure her feet were drippy over the edge of the sofa, sagging mustard yellow cushions. She quickly arranges her black shirt. She wears it with faded jeans, so it's revealing the right amount of cleavage. In her mind, Maxine researched the picture she made. A slender 5 foot feet. Maxine was pretty enough to look a lot more feminine and helpless than she was. Sometimes it annoyed her, but sometimes she likes to make it work for her. With large, wide, space-eyed eyes and high cheekbones, Maxine knew she was attractive enough. She had long, dark hair that was thick and shiny. Guys went for that, or at least most guys did. The one guy that Maxine cared about stepped into the shabby, stamped living room. Maxine gave a limp wave. Not a care in the world. Doesn't matter at all that you don't see me. Maxine has given a lot of thought to why Mike was immune to her charms. Charms. But hey, Maxine wasn't ugly, and she was only a few years younger than Mike. She wasn't dumb or nauseous or anything. In fact, she was smarter than Mike. She was taking social science class at the community college, and sometimes she even read a book for fun in between marathon sessions of QVC watching. Hey, Max, Mike said. Maxine tries to ignore the way her shoulders tighten when Mike uses her nickname. She's been trying to wean people off that name for years. She didn't want to be Max. She wanted to be Maxine, not tomboy trailer trash. Woman, but Maxine wasn't catching on to everyone but herself. Maxine was Max. There's still first, Maxine told Mike. Should still be warm if you're hungry. Mike dropped onto the red vinyl seat of one of the chrome chairs next to the small, Formica-covered kitchen table. He looks toward the small gas stove tucked between an old squat fridge and the integrated bit of the counter that surrounds the white part. Maxine has left the microwave lasagna in the plastic pan of the stove. He repeats, "Did Abby eat?" Mike asks. Just in case, I'm going to show the cover of the novel. So this is the cover. So we're almost like done with the story, but not really. But like this is the cover. Look how cool that cover is. I don't even. Yeah, cool cover. Gotta stay hydrated. Gotta need the water. If you need water or like something, take a water break. It's gonna be a while. Let me just drink this. Water. Yummers. I heard that Blade got delayed. I don't think that movie's ever gonna come out. Yeah, Blade's not coming out. Anyways, let's continue with the story. How long is this? Oh my god. We're kind of almost done. There- Okay, Maxine has left half of the microwave lasagnas in the plastic pan on top of the stove. Did Abby eat? Mike asked. Maxine swings her legs off the sofa and raises an eyebrow at Mike. What do you think? Mike gives Maxine a half grin. Something about the grin got past Maxine's normal defenses. Her gaze lands on the ugly ring on the TV and she sighs before she can think about what she was saying. She blurts out, I wish someone would buy me a ring. Mike says nothing. Immediately mortified at her slip, Maxine stood up, switched off the TV, and picked up her jacket and old black leather backpack. on the end of the sofa, keeping her face turned away from Mike. Maxine said, Abby's been in her room all evening. She's yakking away with her friends of those. Um, Maxine glances at Mike, trying to see him frown. She's really worrying on. She's getting good with those drawings, by the way. Mike grunts and pulls a crumpled piece of red paper from his pocket. Maxine knew what that was. She was surprised he was reading it. Maxine crosses the few feet from the sofa to the kitchen table. She pauses and Mike looks down at him. She likes being this close to him. He smells really good. Not sweet like cologne or anything. He smells like a man, just clean and simple. Y'all should get a dog, Maxine says. A big, mean one. Chain him outside. Mike looks up. The skin crumbles between his brows. Huh? Maxine points at the delinquent notice. We used to get those too. Then we got Bonesy. Poof, no more notices. The furrows between Mike's brows deepen. Mother Rice's expression didn't change. I'll keep that in mind, he says. Maxine shrugs. Miss Who Cares? She heads towards the front door. Just before she reaches for the doorknob, she stops and swings back to look at Mike. I almost forgot. You're on call, and she said, Mike makes a snorting sound. Something about lawyers, and you'll be there tomorrow, or else? Maxine went on. Mike dropped his head into the head, and Maxine stares at his long fingers and thick hair between them. Her hand twitches, wanting so much to reach out, and Maxine gets a grip on herself. She turns back toward the door, and, well, see ya, she said, as she opens up and sits outside. She tries not to let it bother her that Mike didn't say goodbye. Chapter 4. Mike waits for the door to close. He listens to Max's footsteps tap across the concrete porch. As soon as he was sure she was gone, he clenches his fist and squeezes his eyes, closes so hard that his entire body trembles. Mike clamps his mouth closed, too. If he hadn't, he would sure have screamed. A well of despair and frustration and fury was churning in his chest, and it took everything he had to not let it come out, roaring, leaping up in his throat. Like a lion, he finally freed from his cage. Gazing at the delinquent's notice, Mike thought about his aunt's message. Or else? Mike knew what that meant. Damn, his Aunt Jane, when's she going to back off? Mike shook his head. Never, he said out loud, taking a deep breath. He shoved aside thoughts of his aunt, smelling the lasagna sauce, and cheese. His thoughts about eating, but the idea immediately brought a wave of nausea. Mike stood up and looked at the half-eaten pan of lasagna. It was cold, and the cheese was starting to congeal. He was tempted to dump it in the trash, but maybe if he warmed up, he could get Abby to eat it. Not holding his breath, but figuring if he should try to feed his sister, Mike puts the lasagna in a little microwave next to the stove. He pushes a couple buttons and turns toward Abby's room. As Mike rotates, he saw the delinquent's notice. He rages in the frustration combusting. He grabs it and balls it up and flunks it into the plastic bin under the kitchen sink. Then he kicks the bin, slams the cabinet door, and looks up at the dirty white ceiling. 3 feet above Brown's Mike's head, a spider was scurrying up a large strip of webbing. The webbing was attached to a half-completed web that stretched from the glass ceiling light to the corner of the room. Oh, Mike said to the spider. He hoped the thing had better luck at getting us home in order that Mike was having. Abby loved her Heidi tent, but she also loved her little desk. Too bad she couldn't fit in the desk of her Heidi tent anymore. Drawing was much easier at her desk. Toying around with the shoulder straps of her favorite red overalls, Abby looked at an array of color pencils up next to her drawing pad. She looks array and she looks at what colors will be best. Which green would be better for the big tree? Deciding on which colors to choose, Abby picks up the darkest green pencil and begins carefully sketching in the fluffy edge of a tall pine tree branches. The squat orange metal lamps that sat on her desk shone down on tree-like sunshines, making the yellow sun Abby has already drawn above the tree even more brighter. The golden warmth of the desk lamp made Abby's animal friends and the black-haired man and black-haired little girl under the tree look even happier than Abby wanted them to look. Even as Abby looked over the task of creating little people, she glanced at the creatures she drawn, a man and a girl. She meant for it to look like they were playing Ring Around the Rosie, and wasn't sure how she was going to pull that off. But the kid curled and smiled and put their faces, making it clear they were having a good time. For a second, Abby's pencil stopped moving. As for a second, she couldn't pass by her concentration on drawing. If only the drawing would come true, Abby wished. Mike would play with her sometimes. He used to. But lately, behind Abby, her bedroom door closed. She glanced over her shoulder as Mike steps into the room. Mike lifts a hand in greeting, and Abby returns the gesture. Then he swivels back around and bends closer to her drawing. She went back to the sketching the green pine needles. "What's your drawing?" Mike asks as he shufflingly steps across the carpet. "Trees," Abby says simply. She looks up when Mike stops beside her white desk chair. The desk chair was what they call a ladderback chair. Mike had told her that. She didn't like it as much as the desk. It was hard and made her back feel hurt and feel like she was too long. That's why sometimes she drew in her tent, even though the drawings she did there were never as good. Mike's arm slips past Abby's shoulder. He tapped the man in her drawing. This this good looking dude I recognize. Mike moves his finger to one of Abby's friends. Who are these punks? Abby keeps working on the trees. My friends. It's not finished yet. Mike sighs loudly in Abby's ear. She ignores his unspoken criticism. She knew how he felt about her friends. The floor creaks, and Mike takes another step from Abby. Finish later, he said. The word sounded sad. It's time to eat, Abby. Abby set down the green pencil and picks up a yellow one to add one more detail to one of her friends. "Not hungry," she said. Mike lets out another sigh. Abby didn't feel this one, but it was louder. "Don't care," Mike says. "You need to eat. Let's go." The floor creaks again, and Mike's hand closes around Abby's upper arm. He attempts to pull her away from the chair. "No!" Abby shrieks as she drops her pencil and rolls to face her brother. The word came out like a siren from her mouth, the one small sound raising and lowering in pitch and volume. Abby twists her arm to shake off Mike's hand. As soon as Abby pulled away from Mike, he let go of her. Abby rubbed her arm. It didn't really hurt. Mike had held her firmly, but he didn't haven't been so rough. He was never rough. Sighing for the third time, Mike backed away from Abby and sat down on the edge of her bed. She stayed in her chair and watched him. The thin mattress sank under his weight, and the box spring let out a squeak. Mike rubbed his palms over his face. Then he looked at Abby as if he was about to beg her for a favor. "Abs," he said. His voice was soft. "The day I'm just having." Mike swallows and shakes his head. "Just please come and eat some food." Abby looks at her brother. She thought he looked pale, and the little lines of the outside corner of his eyes were bunched up tighter than usual. She shifted her gaze to the mattress. "You're sitting on my friend," Abby says. Mike snorts and stood. "You know what? Do whatever the hell you want. I don't care." Mike starts stomping towards the door, but then he stops again. He speaks again, with his back turned to Abby. "But you should know what happens to little kids who don't eat their dinners." Mike rotates towards Abby in slow motion. He squints at Abby and scrunches his face into what Abby thought was supposed to be a mean look, like he was trying to be one of the bad guys of the cartoon. Abby didn't feel like playing along with Mike's stupid game, so she stayed silent. She looked at him carefully to keep her face totally blank. "My kids don't eat," Mike says, leaning forward. "Their bodies stay the same size forever." Abby shrugs and rolls her eyes. Mike waggles a finger at her, and that means they'll die without ever getting adult rights at the amusement park. Abby almost smiles at that. But Mike doesn't deserve a smile. Abby looks away from Mike back to now to the empty bed as she studies the spot where Mike has been at. "My friend says you're an idiot," Abby told Mike, glancing towards him again. Mike's face went rigid. The vein at the edge of his forehead got bigger and looked like it was hopping up and down under his skin. Abby thinks she's gonna hear his teeth grinding and turns around and toward her door. Just shy of the door, Mike stops. He looks right at Abby. "That is Amarillo," he said. His voice was hard and unfriendly. Mike strode out the room and slams the door behind him. The kablam took seconds to fade out. The yucky feeling Mike left behind lingered for longer than that. Abby looks over the bed. "He doesn't mean it," she says quietly. He has stress. From beyond the door, Mike below was muffled in the distance. "No, I don't," he shouted. Mike drops into the edge of his turned down bed. He sits down so hard that the bedwood slatter's headboard knocks against the wall. As if in response to the thud, a dog barks in the distance. The chair crackled tires on the street and the purr of the engine reaches into the Mike's closed window. Mike looks in the pillow. All he wants to do is flop down and put his face on it, make like a human ostrich, block out the day. But he can't sleep yet. Reaching his butt off his bed, half standing, Mike reaches under his mattress, grabs his pills bottle, wrapping his fingers around the hard, smooth plastic. He closes his eyes, savoring the moment. He always felt like when he started his nighttime routine, Mike opened the bottle of childproof cap and poured one of those small white pills, immediately popping the pill in his mouth. Mike reaches for the glass water. He pulls out the nightstand. He takes a few steps of water, washing down the pill. Finally, Mike pulled the day behind him. Leaning forward, Mike pushes play on the cassette player. Immediately, his bedroom is filled with the peaceful forest sounds. Mike closes his eyes and focuses on the chirps of birds, the cracks and snaps of branches being rustled by the wind. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Then he lays down flat on his bed, opening his eyes. Mike looked straight up above his bed, seeing past the images of the day that flickered through his mind like a herky-jerky slideshow. Mike focuses on the poster tapped to his ceiling. "Penny for fun?" The poster heading reads. "Visit Nesbraska." The word popping from the paper in a bright yellow block letter font, parroted across the top of a shaggy cluster of pine trees. As Mike gazes at the trees, the slideshow in his head continued. He saw the ugly brick government building, the social worker uneven skirt, and the paper number 27. He saw Ragan's smug face. He saw a series of help wanted signs and a matches and series of head shakes that he told he wasn't right for the job. He saw Max's big eyes and Abby's dark ones. He saw the red Lincoln notice and the lasagna he ended up throwing away because he had microwaved it for too long because Abby never came out to eat. "Breathe," he told himself. Zeroing in on the sound of the bang of brooks that was coming from his close-up pair, he squinted at the pine trees, putting all his attention on his ritual so he can let out the rest of the day as it begins to fade away. Briefly, Mike remembers the first night he put up the poster. It sounds like such a stupid idea, but he was desperate that night. It had taken forever for the cassette sounds to begin, and the poster to work their magic. Now, though the effects were more immediate, it's a matter of seconds. Mike lets go of the day. Impressive. His conscience slips over into the pine tree scenes, and the forest grows clearer and more realistic. Mike's gaze was full on, committed now. He was honed in. The forest was no longer a picture of a poster. The trees were no longer frozen in a photograph. They were moving. The sounds didn't come from the cassette. They came from a real forest. The wind on Mike could hear was swaying the trees in a gentle back and forth rhythm. Mike's eyelid began to flutter. Then he felt them droop lower and lower. Closes. But the trees didn't disappear. A gentle breeze cassettes the heavy branches of a cluster of pine trees. The branches skimming back and forward in what almost looks like a chorus dance. In front of the trees, a beam of sunshine slants downward onto bright green wild grass. The light catches moisture at the tip of the grass blades, making them sparkle. Across the grass, caught in the sun brightness, an orange toy plane arcs through the air. A little boy hands grabs the body of the plane. The little boy looks to be 4 years old. The boy has tousled black hair and a bow-like lips. "Garrett," A woman's voice calls out, "Stay close." Garrett and his airplane whip past a picnic table and disappear from view, just as a red spray of ketchup splats over a burger on a paper plate lying on the table. A smiling, dark haired man who looks like an adult version of Lil Garrett walks past the picnic table. The man carrying a couple sleeping bags laughs and calls out, "How about some burgers with that ketchup, hun?" Mike's 12-year-olds and all having fun, grins at his mom. She looks out the ketchup in her hand and winks at Mike. Everything's better than ketchup, right, Mike? Right? Mike reaches for a soda and immediately knocks over the bottle with a drink. The soda fizzing escapes from the bottle across the table. The flying brown liquid sounds like it's sizzling as it pulls over the wood. "Oops," Mike's mom says. She turns away from the table. I'm gonna go grab a towel. Keep an eye on brother, okay?" Mike starts to turn towards Garrett, but as he does, the edge of a frisbee nearly grazes Mike's cheek as it whizzes past. Mike instantly jumps away from the jog away from the picnic table to a giant bright blue disc, which has landed at the edge of the family campsite. Mike reaches to grab the frisbee in seconds. He picks it up as his hands close over the picnic rim of the disc. Mike hears the sound of a car engine revving. Mike straightens and looks around. He doesn't see the car, but there's something more important that he does see. "Garrett, Garrett!" Mike calls. Garrett is nowhere in sight. Frisbee dangling from his hand. Mike starts walking toward the far side of the campsite. His pace is casual at first, then his brother continues. Absence fills him with urgency. Mike starts trotting towards the trees. That line, the little road that led to the site. "Garrett!" Mike calls again. Mike hears the crackling pink sounds of tires train over gravel toward trees. He sees the hulking shape of a black car as it pulls away from the campground. Mike breaks into a full run. "Garrett!" Mike's shout is shrill and piercing. Mike's in the trees now. The long pine needles poke at his face. The branches just slapping at him. It's sort of like it's trying to grab him. Falling twigs and pine cones crackle under Mike's feet. His nostrils are filled with the sharp smell of pine resins and the moist sense of the ground's soft soil. Mike bursts out of the trees, just in time to see the back car pick up speed. The car is at least 50 feet past Mike. It's zooming away, Mike panted hard toward the back of the car. The heart feels like it's being twisted in his chest as he looks at the car rear window. "Garrett!" Mike gasps. Garrett's pale, white-eyed face looks back at Mike to the window, clenching his orange airplane. Garrett pulls a hand to the glass. Garrett's eyes are filled with tears. His mouth is wide open, calling out. Mike opens his mouth too. He starts to let out a scream. The beep, beep, beep of Mike's alarm felt like a lasso that clinched up around him and yanked him out of his sleep. Pulling a face, Mike reached for his alarm. Today, his palm managed to find the top of the alarm. As soon as the beeping stopped, Mike smoothly went through his morning routine. Cassette player off, rewind, pillows under the mattress, push-ups. Mike's head didn't hurt as much this morning, but it didn't mean he felt any better. He would have felt better if he could fix things. And after 13 years of trying, he's starting to think that would never happen. Alrighty. Almost. Chapter 5. Watching the trio of little boys run down the grassy hill, their high-pitched whoops tumble towards with their laughter. Mike lets himself pass for a few seconds, and the kids glee. The boys are a blur of motion, curly hair, a red tennis shoe, skinny white arms, plump face grin, trumpeting fist. The boys appear to be racing, but their race devolves into a wrestling dumpling match. When they reach the bottom of the hill, they shout to their feet and raise the shimmering fist. They all seem to think they won. What it would be like to be carefree, Mike asked himself. Thinking about his dream, he reminded him that he had a micro taste of what that kind of devil may care fun every night. He almost wishes he didn't though. What was the feeling of what was stolen from him over and over again as his dream repeated night after night? The loss was more profound by the memory of what fun felt like. The boys ran back up the hill, and Mike watched them start another tumbling around. Then he brought his gate to take in the Child Development Center at the top of the hill. In contrast to the government building, Mike has been good. Mike has been in the day before. The development center was a sleek, modern white flow of long glass-filled walls under a gleaming metal roof, surrounded by nature, the expansive of the grass, as well as expertly landscape displays of flowery bushes and tall trees. The center was not even the same universe as the ugly brick building that houses the social services. Even the sky was prettier here, or so it seemed. Yesterday the gray sky was gone. Today's sky was seal blue. It was filled with playfully white clouds, all lovely and soft edged and rolling through the sky, not unlike the boy running on the hill. The sun was playing peekaboo with the clouds. Its brilliance nipped in and out, and it peeked from behind the white studs, and then dipped back behind them again. The little boys weren't the only ones having fun in the grassy hills outside the center of the playground equipment in a singular area near the edge of the grass. 20 plus kids were running around, pumping themselves higher and higher on the swings or climbing the monkey bars or teeter-tottering with a friend. The kids ranged in the age of 6 to 15. The older kids were playing, prey or sitting in the grass or one of them our bench placed around the area. They were either chatting with each other or spoke to white coated adults. The adults were the doctors, MD and PhDs, who oversaw the kids who came to the center. The center doctors had a wide array of expertise. Mike has found out that they were trained to help all sorts of kids with all sorts of development problems. Leaning forward across the chalk lens fence at the outer edge of the center spawning property, Mike vaguely wonders how his life might have turned out differently if he had been put into a place like this to come to when he was 12. Grief was a development problem, wasn't it? Loss and guilt could stunt growth every bit as much as the kind of psychological problems they treated here. Turning away from the more active children, Mike forced himself to look towards his sister. He spotted her, of course, as soon as he got out of the car. Abby sat on the benches and on the far side of the center portico covered entrance. With her drawing pads and her colored pencils, Abby was well far away from the kids. Even so, she was talking. Mike was far away from Abby that he couldn't hear what she was saying, but he could see her lips moving. He could also see that her turn to look her behind her looks on the front and the benches as she was speaking to invincible companions. The sun burst from behind the clouds again, and the light blinded Mike, closing his eyes. He wipes his face, his palms. Man, he was exhausted. No matter how much time he spent in bed, he never got enough rest. No mystery here. Sleep wasn't sleep for Mike. It was a project. Mike felt a cold hand on his forehead and arm, and he inhaled the scent of orange blossoms. He opened up the eyes and did his best to smile at the slender white hair woman who stared in front of him. Dr. Lillian, Abby's psychologist, was a nice lady with large eyes that might have been dark blue or green or brown. Mike hasn't been able to figure it out because the color seems to change depending on the lighting. Or maybe that depends on the doctor's mood. Dr. Lillian had a friendly face with a wide, full smile, tall and graceful. She wore her hair in a shaggy chin lip cut and her clothes were as casual as her hair. She usually had it on loose, light colored yoga pants and pastel colored turnip shirts. She didn't wear a lot because they're here, Dr. Leon says. Are you ready? Mike's weak smile disappears entirely. Not really, he says. Dr. Leon passes his arm, but she didn't speak. Mike was sure she wanted to help, but there was something she couldn't do. Let's get this over this. Let's get this over with. My God, Mike says, mumbling his words. Usually, Mike was pretty comfortable in Dr. Lillian's office A nice large room with a thick blue carpet and furnished sparely with comfortably white small desk and row matching shelves stuffed with book and a few nature-themed photos. A high back-powered blue office chair as well, three matching plush thick-armed guest chairs, and a large blue and cream striped sofa. The office was obviously designed to be calming most days. It was not, not today. It was possible for a room to be calming when Aunt Jane was not in it. Her presence was calm kryptonite. At just 5 feet fuller, Jane Smith was an imposing woman. Her petite appearance was helped along by the pastel pantsuits she's nearly always worn. Today's suit was a very pale green. When Jane stood still, if you didn't know her, she could look exceptional, even in Coscrindo. With short, dirty blonde hair that Mike was pretty sure she died now. She was, after all, in her 50s. Jane had a pale, freckled complexion, ordinary brown eyes, and a narrowed face shaped like an upside down egg. In the abstract, she might have been pretty. It's not for her personality. Just look at him. Mike's aunt angrily shouts. She waves her arms all wildly, combined with her exaggerated facial expressions. The flapping arms makes her look all unhinged. She thought he had problems. Well, he did have problems, but that wasn't the point. Dr. Lillian's guest chair was arranged in front of her desk, spaced around 2 feet apart. 2 feet wasn't nearly enough space. Mike sits next to Aunt Jane, in the left. She had to lean back where she threw her arms around. On the other side of Aunt Jane, her lawyer covered in the other guest chair. He was sitting so back and away from his client. Clearly, he didn't want to be closer anywhere like Mike did. Dr. Lillian, safely behind her desk, was the only person sitting straight. She was also the only person in the room who seemed to be benefiting from her calm decor. What is it? 10 o'clock in the morning? Jane continues her tirade, and he could barely keep his eyes open. Mike, who was aware his eyes were half closed, resisted the urge to shut them entirely. As he's tired, as he was, his eyes weren't droopy because of that. He had them partially shut to try to dampen the impact of his aunt's tantrum. This was a trick he leaned from morning. This is a trick he learned from many years ago. Aunt Jane was wounded up for a specific reason today. She had an agenda, but it wouldn't even matter if she didn't have one. She's just a high-strung woman, pretty loud, judgmental. Jane was the reason Mike has learned the word narcissist when he was a boy. It was the word his mother had used to describe her sister-in-law. Jane whips her arms toward the air again, and Mike begins to back away like a turtle shrinking its shell. If only he had a shell to shrink through. This degenerate, Jane continues, is being entrusted with the well-being of a mentally ill child. Mike involves veterinary brought a hand up to cover his right ear. Jane, high pitch, which would have done an operatic soprano proud, was nearly hurting his eardrums. Cooking his head, Mike looked behind Jane to see the lawyer. Just call me Doug. I'm not much of a formality. Was having the same problem, but he couldn't tell. Doug, a large man whose body was freakily similar in shape to a melting ice cream cone, gave no indication that he was hearing or seeing anything. The only reason Mike could tell that Doug was alive was that Doug's chest, heavily visibly with the efforts to breathe, made a fainting whistle sound every time he inhaled. Studying Doug, Mike had a hard time how this guy became a lawyer, or even how he practiced going. He looked like he was on the verge of going into a coma. Jane might have been making a big deal about Mike's droopy eyes, but what about the lawyer's slack lids? Heck, his whole face was a slag. Round and jolly, Doug's cheeks pressed against a fleshy nose, squeezed a too small mouth. His tiny eyes were grave and dull looking. They matched his suit, which was the colors of the day clouds. The suit was baggy and wrinkled. Mike shifts his attention away from Doug and returns it to his aunt, who was still ranting. He turns back and just for kicks. Who cares for the mentally ill? Should have at least a hint of maturity, right? Jane points at Mike's jeans and t-shirts. Do you see maturity in him? Any Jane pulls her fist on her hips and glares at Dr. Lillian. Dr. Lillian ignores the question. As made clear many times, Dr. Lillian says, Abby is not mentally ill. Abby just. Aunt Jane makes a sound, cutting her off. That was half snorted and half raspberry. Oh, right, she says. Of course not, because it's perfectly normal to sit around by yourself drawing pictures and talking to magical creatures who do not exist. Jane wounds herself even tighter. That child is a train wreck, she shouts. She's light years behind where she should be at this age, and it's only going to get worse. By the time Jane got to the end of the sentence, her face was bright red. Even her face was cracking. Like, how about we just take a slow breath, Dr. Radian says, so we can calm down. That we? There's no we. Dr. Lydian was calm. Doug was calm as well. He was practically unconscious. Mike was tense, but he was calm enough. Jane was the one who was, don't you tell me to calm down. She points a finger at Dr. Lillian. You're her doctor. You're trying to make me feel like I'm the cuckoo one here? There was no trying, Mike thought. Jane was the cuckoo one in the room. And what he did to that poor man. Oh my God, Jane said. The volume of her words dropped startlingly, and her tone changes to what Mike thought was supposed to be sympathetic. Mike watches Jane's lower lip quiver. He suppresses a smile when he saw Jane squinch her eye like she was trying to squeeze a tear. Wait, Jane waves a hand like Southern Belle attempting to stray off an attack of vapors. I'm sorry, she said. I just. Jane ducks a tissue out of a large cream-colored purse. She blows her nose loudly. Mike glances over at Dr. Lillian. She met his gaze and gave him a sympathetic look. Real sympathetic, not the fake crap Jake was attempting to sell in the room. Jane blows her nose again. Mike and Dr. Lillian and Doug sense silently. This is a one-woman's play. All they can do was wait for her to get to her next line. Jane finishes the nose blowing, and she drops her dirty tissue on the floor. Mike looks at it as he felt his lips curl. He really hates his aunt. Now look, Jane says. Mike wasn't sure who she's talking to. Him? Dr. Lillian? Obviously not Doug. I tried to play nice, Jane went on. I really did. She clasps her hands together and pastes a nice smile on her face. Mike manages not to puke. But I have to think about Abby now, Jane says. She arranges her features into an expression that Mike thought was supposed to be regret. It looks more like anticipation. Enough is enough, Jane says. Finally, something Mike can agree with. He had more than enough of this meeting. No one said anything, Jane looked at Mike. Then she turned to Doug. Doug looked like he could use a ventilator. Mike wasn't sure Doug had heard a word Jane said. Doug, Jane said. Doug didn't move. Jane decides to lean over and poke Doug in the ribs hard. Doug! Doug jerks and coughs and blinks several times. He looks around and reminds himself where he was. Once orientated, he clears his throat and picks up a briefcase that was sat next to him and waves his small feet. The feet were tugged into expensive black shoes. Mike thought they were called Oxfords. Jane taps her long, mentioning fingernails covered in pink pale polish that in no way matched her personality. On the slick leather of her bag, she pulls her lips together into a disapproving purse. Doug was oblivious of his client's scrutiny. He concentrated on his opening his briefcase. When he finally pulled out the sheaf of paper, Jane snatched them and turned to shove them at Mike. He had no choice but to take them. Glancing down, Mike's stomach shrivels. They were custody papers. In your heart, Jane says, you know this is the right thing to do. Mike didn't know that at all. In his heart, or any other part of his body, I hope that you will sign, Jane says. Mike lifts his head, and if I don't? Jane waves a hand towards Doug. Then my lawyer and I will take you to court, where any judge of an ounce of sanity will make sure that you never see your sister again. Dr. Lillian clears her throat and begins. That's Jane shouts from her chair and holds the flat of her palm toward Dr. Lillian. Like a travel cop. That's it. We're done here. Jane takes a step toward Doug and whacks him on the shoulder. Like an obedient, if abused dog. He closes his briefcase and stood. Dr. Lillian stood too. What about Abby? She asked Jane. Have you considered what she may have want? Jane slowly turns over to Dr. Lillian, pulling in her chin and drawing her eyebrows together. Jane tips her head to one side, and she was studying something in the circus freak show. Abby, Jane says, is 10 years old. I think we're gonna stop when Mike said. In contrast to the serene oasis of Dr. Lillian's office, the development center was a chaos of color and light. The walls were papered in red, purple, and orange stripes, and the halls were covered in carpet squares of nearly every color imaginable. When Mike and Abby first met with Dr. Lillian, she had explained that a lot of kids at the center needed an ambulance of the simulation. That might have been the case, but the visual simulation got on Mike's nerves, especially now, after Jane and Doug has left Dr. Lillian's office. She asked Mike if he needs a minute. He shaking his head and stood up. He was really rattled and furious, and naturally he didn't know exactly what he felt. He couldn't put a word to it. All he knew was that his stomach was not feeling right. It was in 50 separate knots. His colon felt so tangled. He would have been surprised that the food never got through as well. His head didn't feel so good either. His ears were hot and trying to make an invisible hand clamp into his skull, trying to press him down to the floor. Mike didn't want to feel this way in front of Dr. Lillian. He needed to get out there as well. That's why they were in the halls when Mike said he had to go. Dr. Lillian insisted on him walking out. Other than all the colors, the hall was empty. Surprising himself, because he had plans on just getting away with saying a word. Mike blurted she doesn't want Abby. She wants the trusted fun. Dr. Lillian glances at Mike and gives him a gentle smile of understanding. Dr. Lillian was good at understanding. Maybe that's why Mike kept talking. The trust was set up for Abby, not anyone else. Not me either. I can't even use it to pay the rent, and that's fine. I'm glad it's there for her. Dr. Lillian gives Mike a nugget smile. This one seems to be one of the approval. When Mike and the lawyer are going to, that lawyer and Jane are going to find a way to get into the trust. If she gets custody of Abby, Mike went on. I just know it. That's what her long-term plan is. Dr. Lillian didn't even disagree. In the short term, she'll get the check from the state, Mike says. It's not about Abby. It's about Jane. It's always about Jane. Dr. Lillian opens her mouth but then closes it. Another symphony smile told Mike that once again she didn't disagree with him. Together they turned a corner, heading towards the center activity room. A couple of boys around about Abby's age went racing past. The smell of dirty socks and chocolate went with them. So did the pounding of their feet. She makes some good points, though, Mike says. Aunt Jane, I hate to admit it, but she's right. Not really fit to be raising a kid. Dr. Lillian finally speaks. I know a little girl who strongly disagrees. Mike throws his hands up. Come on, Doc, you can't be serious. Abby talks to the ear more than she talks to me. I could drop dead and she'll be too busy drawing pictures to even notice. They reach through the double doors that led into the activity room, but Dr. Lillian keeps walking. She motions for Mike to follow her. He did. Just past the door and a long wide window, they look into the room with a big bright blue rider flooring and multiple play areas. Mike didn't answer at first. Some of the areas are not. Right. Some of the areas are nothing more than a collection of colorful pillows and cushy play cubes that kids stacked into the four lays to draw on play games. Some were climbing towers, some were elaborated cave-like areas, similar to Abby's Heidi tent, but more was sophisticated. The play area were placed wide apart, so there was plenty of open space for the kids to run around. Mike did a quick count. 9 kids were either chasing one another or playing games. There was also several little in the table dotting the room. The only one currently occupied was the one on the far side of the room. That's where Abby sat by herself. Mike gestured toward his sister. See what I mean? Dr. Lillian watches Abby as she spoke. You know, pictures hold tremendous power for children. Dr. Lillian shifts to face Mike. You heard the expression, seeing is believing? Mike frowns and shrugs. Sure. What was the doctor getting at? Dr. Lillian crushes her arm and leans back against the glass. Before we lean to speak, images are the most important tool we have for understanding the world around us. What's real, what matters to us most. These are things children learn to communicate almost exclusively through pictures. Dr. Leonie pauses, and Mike nods. Okay? He still didn't see her point. Dr. Lillian cooks up something in her head and thinks for a second. Then she tries again. See, kids aren't all that good at constantly accessing what they feel. Their artwork is like their subconscious. So you're saying Abby's drawings actually mean something. Mike asks what the light bulb finally came in. Dr. Lillian nods several times, without question. Mike chews on that for a second. Dr. Lillian pulls a hand on his shoulder. So let me ask you this. Who's featured prominently in 9 out of 10 of your drawings? Mike didn't speak. We need the answer to Dr. Lillian's questions. Mike was in most of Abby's drawings. Dr. Lillian squeezes Mike's shoulder. I can see you get it. She laughs. Like it or not, you're her world. Dr. Lillian chuckles. You might not believe you're the man for the job, but your sister certainly does. Mike stares at Dr. Lillian for a few seconds. Then he shifts his attention back to Abby. Could it be true? Was he really doing the best thing for Abby? For a second, Mike felt his shoulder lift. His stomach tries to unknot, but then the inner stars kink up again. His shoulder slumps. Even if it was good for Abby, how could he take care of her? He couldn't earn enough to support them. And how could he get what he needed when he couldn't even give himself what he needed? And then there was Aunt Jane. How could he stop her from getting custody? These and a thousand other questions that strove through Mike's mind. What if it's not up to me? Mike asked, voicing one of the questions out loud. My aunt, she's an idiot, but she's right. No judge in the world is going to take my side. Dr. Lillian shook her head. Don't be so quick to throw in the towel. You, Abby's primary caregiver, have been given some time. And you are in immediate family. Demonstrate even a modicum of stability, and a judge might surprise you. Is that true? Mike wonders. Did he have a chance? Dr. Lillian tilts her head. Have you found a job yet? She asks. Mike didn't answer the question, but his face shows otherwise what he must have done. Even a second of thinking about a job hunting failures probably made him look like he just sucked a lemon. Dr. Lillian pats Mike on the back. That would be the place to start, she says. Chapter 6. Mike sat on his kitchen table. In one hand, he held his cell phone. On the other hand, he's turning the soda around and around on a stretched formula surface. The ever encircling can was next to Steve Dragon's business card. The card was crumpled up, swept behind the outside of the soda can, and Mike's fingers was getting wetter and wetter, and still he kept turning on the can. He couldn't bring himself to do what he needed to do. Mike glances over at Abby, who sat on the sofa watching TV. Mike wasn't sure what she was watching, but there was howling coming from the set and laughter. It was getting on Mike's nerves. Well, no sound of the TV wasn't really going to get on his nerves this time. It was Abby herself who was bugging him. As Abby watched the TV, she firmly pointed at it and then looked to the left as if sharing a moment with someone. Mike couldn't see. Was that her invisible friend? What was Mike going to do about Abby's imaginary friends? Looking away from Abby, Mike gazed down on the custody papers. He tossed over the table when he and Abby had gone home. He let down face down, but he didn't know he had to pick them up and put them away. Abby didn't even know what was going on yet. Mike stood up and shoved the papers into the kitchen drawer. The papers reminded Mike of Jane's plan. Mike's attention shifts back to Abby. See, Abby whispers, bears can't do that. A horrifying thought leaps out of the mind of confusion in Mike's head. Why would Aunt Jane do with Abby's invisible friends if she has custody? As soon as Mike had asked himself the question, he knew the answer. Jane would have put Abby in some kind of institution, and once Abby was put away, Jane would have found a way to take all the money in Abby's trust funds. Mike lets go of the soda cans, wipes his finger off the jeans, and pulls out the business card closer to him. He punches Raglan's number into the phone. Abby continues to watch her cartoon and discuss it with her invisible friend. Mike takes a deep breath as he listens to the phone ring in his ear. A click. Raglan's voice. It's all raspy. This is Raglan? Hi, Mike says, Mr. Raglan. Mr. Raglan, this is Mike Smith. Raglan is meek. All Mike could hear was the faint sound of breathing coming through the phone line. Um, the guy who stomped out of your office yesterday, Mike tried. More silence. Mike counts his head. 1, 2, 3. Ah, yes. His voice switched to the smooth tone. Then the voice turns gruff. Mister, I can't work at nights. Mike pulls the phone from his ears and scowls at it. Man, he really did hate this guy. Mike gives to look at Abby. He grits his teeth and returns the phone to its proper position. That job you told me about, Mike says between his clenched teeth. It's still available? Yeah. It's most definitely available. Why? Did you have a change of heart? Raglan says. No, Mike thought. His heart didn't change at all, but that didn't matter. He glances at Abby again. How soon can I start? Mike asks. Mike's car sputters as he turns around the street that led toward the most depressed part of town. He didn't blame the car for his hesitation. Mike didn't want to go down the street either. Pouring rain and swallows even though the sun was still grasping onto the last of its day. The long straight road was bordered by testaments to business class. On both sides of the cracking, broken asphalt and the crumbling sidewalks that ran alongside it. An endless march of failed or failing enterprises hoked in the descending dusk. A boarded up factory in the relic gas station, a small strip of the mall with only three still open, dimly lit businesses, a restaurant with only two cars in a parking lot and a half sign, and a couple of bars that would make seedy bars look upscale. The whole area would depress even the most upbeat person. Since Mike hasn't been upbeat in years, he starts at a defect, and the area shoves him in further into the dark hole of despair. Keeping one hand on the steering wheel, Mike using the other one to hold a piece of paper he crumbled while listening to Raglan's directions on it. The paper was covered in the paper from the custody papers. Mike frowns as the directions and leans forward to peer left and right to the windshield. What the hell is this place? He asks. Too bad he didn't have an invisible friend to answer him. Instead, a helpful invisible friend. Mike had Raglan's voice in sing-song mode in his head. So here's the deal. Raglan's voice replays in Mike's mind. The voice rose and felt sound muffled as it had when Raglan had spoken over the phone. This place was pretty out there. It was hugely popular with the kids back in the 80s. But it's been shut down for a long time now. Only reason they haven't been given the wrecking ball treatment is the owners can't Sentinel just can't bring themselves to let it go yet. There was something weird about the way Raglan said sentimental, but Mike couldn't figure out what it was, then or now. Checking his notes again, Mike spots the term he'd been took to look for. He urges the car past another shuttered business at the nail salon. No great loss. There were too many of those in town. The new streets were narrower than the last one, and after just a couple hundred feet, it was no longer bordered by old business. Thick skies of the tall trees pressed close to the road. It felt like Mike was heading toward the countryside. Before things got to a road, to Lakeside Desert Park lot. It was just as Raglan has described it. Mike turned on his signal of the habit. No one around he pulled off was off the road into the lot. As his car crept forward, swirls of dying leaves skimmed across the cramped pavement, illuminated by the car headlights. A few paper cups, a discarded newspaper, and a rattled up fast food bag scattered past with the leaves. Mike pulled his car forward into a large destined to hold at least 50 or more cars, judging from the faded to almost invisible white paint, the marking of paper spots. It hasn't had that many vehicles in a long time. Mike pulls into what would have been the prime parking spot, just a few feet from the night shining entrance of a building that was so hidden in the dark. It was little more than a showing shadow, surrounded by trees and far removed from other business. The building had no exterior lights. The old car headlights did little to give Mike a complete picture of the place. All he saw was red double doors and a boarded up window. Mike turns off the engine. Typically it shuts for a few seconds, but it goes quiet. Mike looks on the side window. Even though he had minutes to spare, he decides to reach the part of town. It's dusk. Ripley lays down night, completely lacking of any lighting. Mike was 100% sure he was not in a safe place, but there was no turning back now. Looking left and right, Mike shows himself and picks up his backpack. He loads his overnight shoulder as he needs in. He got out of his car and slunks the bag over his shoulder, making sure his car was locked, as if anyone wanted to steal it. Mike takes a few steps toward the barely invisible building entrance. Once again, Mike hears Raglan's voice in his head. Back to the rasp. Anyways, there's been trouble with break-ins over the years, Raglan says. Vagrants, drunks, obviously not a deal. No kidding, Mike said. He looks around running full circle. Seems to be alone. But there was a place to stay concealed. He grips his flat strap of the backpack and thought about what he packed. He thought he remembered everything, but like a dolt, he thought he hadn't thought of a flashlight. Suddenly, Mike wanders to be inside the building. He felt too exposed. Hurrying forward, Mike headed toward the double doors. The doors were faded red, and judging from a few dents at the panel, they were made of metal. He quickly found the security pads next to the door, just when Ryan said it would be. The code was an easy one. Mike had to memorize, so he quickly typed it in. A loud click from the door. Disintegrated lock, Mike figured. He stepped to his left and grabbed a thick vertical black metal handle. He pulled open one of the heavy doors. The door creaked. Of course it creaked. Mike ignored the shiver that frisked down his spine. It felt like one of the dry leaves from the road had gotten his shirt was tumbling and over and down his tailbone. Mike stepped into the building, leaving the door open just in case. He hesitated on the edge of the deep gloom. He inhaled several odors that made him doubt whether he was in the right decision, making the right decision. The air smelled stale, not surprised for an old, unoccupied place, but more like for a musky area. A resounding clink nearly launches Mike out of his sneakers. He whirls. Either the wind has shoved at the door or it was self-closing hinge. The door was shut. As sturdy as the area outside has felt, that closed door was an even more powerful trigger of Mike's fight or flight instincts. His heart rate doubled. He had a powerful urge to throw himself at the door and run for his life, which was silly. He could grip it to himself. Mike's words seemed to caper away from himself. The faint echo rotates around him. He ignores the discomforting smell and studies his surroundings. Early lighting around the light panels that held down the old dim light bulbs, and darting from the glass cupboards. The expanse in front of Mike's was a large, maybe 30 feet around lobby. The right and left side of the lobby were lined with low red vinyl covered bar benches. The opening of what looked like a long hallway extended off to the right. The other side of the lobby, opposite Mike, was a large archway. A little light shone through it, but it's not enough light for Mike to see what would be on it. Although the lobby lighting was down and the fan up digging, Mike could see enough to be struck by the lobby, almost circling the deckard. The walls above the benches were striped red and white. The floor beneath Mike's feet was covered with black and white checkerboard. It was all cracked and the whole section of it was cleaned away from the floor. Hanging on the striped wall rows of the large old-fashioned posters behind glass advertises Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Mike takes a step forward, his shoes caught in the crack as it crackles. Once again, Mike hears voice is on his head. The security cameras, outdated but fully operational. Floodlights in the exterior, cameras inside and out. Fair warning, the power can be a little screwy. If you have any issues, you find a breaker in the main office, so just give it a flip. As soon as Raglan's voice fades from Mike's brain, already weakened overhead, the lights flicker as Mike looks up at them. Oh, no, you don't. He better find the office, he thought. Quickly, Mike crosses the lobby and looks down the hallway. The 6 foot wide corridor was long, and it wasn't any better than the lobby. At the far end of the hallway, 50 feet from Mike, a bright red exit sign glows. Mike uses the North Star as he steps forward into what he felt like was a creepy tunnel. Raglan's voice spoke up in Mike's head again. Mike makes a face. He really didn't want to be here. He didn't really like the rasp sing song in his mind. Now, Mike heard Raglan say in his memory, the rest of the building is on a different breaker, which was probably installed back when Raglan was still in the office. Mike mentally is mute on Raglan as he continues forward. Mike kept his gaze sweeping left and right as he went. Mike's footsteps slowly make a swift tap sound as he walks over more of the old black and white linoleum. Mike could hear his breath moving too. He was still on edge. The hallways were painted in the same red and white stripes Mike had seen in the lobby. There were also lines with large frame posters. These posters, however, weren't pizzeria advertisements. They were more art than marketing. Some of the posters were images of Peach playing children. The rest featured the odd-looking cartoon characters. One was with an image of a brown bear wearing a bow tie and a top hat. The bear looked friendly enough, and Mike looked at the paws when he continued and spied a bright yellow chick wearing a bib and holding a googly-eyed cupcake, a bright bunny gripping an electric guitar, and a fox wearing an eye patch. The toothy grin of the critters didn't look at behind. Mike found the fox, especially the disconcerting. The fox one uncovered eyes seemed to sparkle with good cheer, but the way the fox brandished his hook suggested that the liberty was a fake aid. Mike kept going above him, or above the bank of Ford Sense. Light dims a little. Raglan voices returns to Mike's mind. My advice to you, don't mess with anything. I guess you knew you got a burning desire to die in fire. No pun intended. Haha, Mike thought, as he looks up at the feeble light. Mike takes another step as he stifled of when he heard a loud crunch. He looks down and realizes just a few broken glass poster frames. He looks into the one on the right. It features the four cartoon animals, one, but the fox is on the stage, unlike the others. Behind old-fashioned microphones, the fox is off to his left on his own purple curtain stage. Something about the separation felt threatening to Mike. He quickly went past the poster. He looks ahead and spots the doorway he was aiming for. Raglan voice kicks in again. You'll find the office at the end of the main hall, last door on the right. Mike reaches the door like the main door to the building. It was red metals, scarred and dented, very dented. It looked like someone or something had tried to bash the door in. The frosted glass window in the upper part of the door, however, was intact. Strange. Mike fronted at them But he reached for the black knob. It turned wheelie and Mike raised the door open once again. He was tense, waist to the flame. Jeez, he thought, why am I so freaking jumpy? When Mike stepped into the office, nothing attacked him. Nothing reserved him either. The office dimply lit only by a red and brown blaze coming from a colored bolt above a large breaker box with a prominent red handle was small and comforting. Probably because of the single red bulb, the room made him think of the command rooms in submarines. The sensation of being submerged was heightened him not just by the room darkness, but also by its bring air. The last time Mike had smelled something like this in the room, he's been in the boxing gym with a friend. The smell had the combination of sweat and blood. Mike's nose twitches as he looks around. He might as well get used to the smell and familiarize himself with the space. He was going to be spending a lot of time with it. The office was pretty sparse. It contains a long, narrow black metal desk, which sat in the front of a matching credenza, a small black fan and a landline phone next to an answering machine sat on it. The desk held an old TV sitting on top of an equality old VCR, a desktop computer, and several CCTV monitors stacked on a rack at the back of the edge of the desk. Two gray metal filling cabinets were pushed against the wall, opposed to the desk. One was filling the cabinet with missing drawers. The other was badly banged up along the front as if it was been knocked over. Mike gazes dropped length of the filling cabinet. The mark didn't make him happier than the office smell did. Mike pulls his gaze from his scratch marks. He looks up at the unlit fluorescent lights above him. He noticed that the bank of the lights were next to the intercom speaker. Mike leans to the breaker box again. Next to the breaker box, a large gray metal locker stood alone. Looks like he had run away from his friends in high school hallway. Mike raises an eyebrow. Was he supposed to keep his stuff in that? Mostly you'll just be hanging it out in the office. Random plays on with Mike's head again. The job's pretty easy. Just keep your eyes on the monitors and don't let anyone in. Piece of cake, right? The very second that Mike in her ragged voice stopped, the feeble light in the office and the hallway went out completely. All the electricity cut out. The only remaining illumination came from the red emergency bulb. Nope. He immediately started toward the bulb and grabbed the lever on the breaker box and shoved the lever upwards. Raglan's voice once again starts up. See you on the flip side, Raglan says. We're gonna learn chapter 7, and we're gonna stop there. We'll continue tomorrow.